First of all, let me just say this executive order was so beautifully and thoroughly written. And the executive order was called Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation. But I think that's important because one of the things that this EO does not address, but what has been co-opted by the left, is the phrase gender affirming care. This EO does not refer to it as that. They call it plainly what it is: chemical and surgical mutilation. Watching that video, to me, it just felt like the height of hypocrisy, Hollywood hypocrisy. But I think it was on par with how the campaign between Donald Trump and between Kamala Harris went. Kamala Harris's campaign, she had people like Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B on stage with her. That doesn't represent the American people. To put it pretty plainly, it means there is a future for women's sports. What we saw under the Biden administration was the most regressive, anti-woman, anti-reality pursuit we have seen thus far.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber. Welcome back to Better for America. This is the show where we dive into the biggest stories, the boldest voices, and the most inspiring figures of our time. Today, we have a powerhouse guest, an elite athlete, fearless advocate, and the host of Gains for Girls podcast on Outkick.com, Riley Gaines. Riley, thank you so much for being back with me today.
Of course. As always, I am just thrilled to be on with you. So thank you very much.
You know, Riley, the recent federal court ruling which rejected the Biden administration's Title IX rewrite is being called a huge win for girls and women across America. At the same time, Trump's executive order reinforcing the recognition of two genders has further solidified protections for female athletes. Now, as someone who has been on the front lines of this battle, what do these decisions mean for the future of women's sports and the fight for fairness in competition?
Well, to put it pretty plainly, it means there is a future for women's sports. What we saw under the Biden administration was the most regressive, anti-woman, anti-reality pursuit we have seen thus far. So to now see some common sense, some sanity, and some reversals from those positions that had been taken by Joe Biden and his administration and leadership, even outside of our federal government, even by that of the NCAA in those 4 years under Biden's tenure, has been huge. So it means there is a future, to put it pretty plainly. I'm excited. There have been lots and lots of wins, whether it is the executive orders that have already and will soon be issued pertaining to women's sports, whether it's, you're right, the federal judge in Kentucky who vacated Joe Biden's radical Title IX rewrite nationwide, which means ultimately that schools now are not required to put men on women's teams or men in women's locker rooms or men in women's dorms. It's a huge first step, but I call it a first step because there's certainly a lot more work to do. I think the biggest issue potentially that I could see happening is people, they wipe their hands and they say, we've won, it's over, and they just develop this sense of complacency. But that would be your first mistake because it is not over. Lots and lots more to do, but now it looks like we finally have the opportunity to do it and to get it done. And I just want to point out the difference between now, where we are in the year 2025, even compared to 2 years ago. Outlets wouldn't talk about stories like mine, at least not fairly. They certainly wouldn't be applauding President Trump's executive order declaring there are only two sexes in the way that they are now. So just in a matter of 2 years, I think it goes to show you how courage begets courage, how one person willing to say, this is wrong, it's unfair, it's unsafe, it's not righteous by any means, it emboldens more and more people to do the same. So big wins definitely under our belt within the first week, basically, of President Trump's administration, but more work to do.
Yes, and we just love seeing how your advocacy is really being acknowledged and so appreciate the work that you've put into this for so many years. Now, just on Tuesday, President Trump signed an executive order to restrict chemical and surgical sex change procedures for minors. And you recently shared on X that blue states are using taxpayer dollars to fund unregulated child mutilation procedures with this 340B program. That's a federal program. Now, I'm wondering, how this executive order may impact these healthcare organizations. What kind of impact do you think that EO will have on these blue states? Do you think that they may file lawsuit against the federal government or claim that in some way it violates constitutional rights? What do you think is going to come out of that?
It'll be interesting to see how the blue states push back, because what we have learned, again, over the past few years is that they are relentless. They will not roll over, and they will not allow these issues to just die off. So it'll be interesting to see the route they take. But a couple facts from this EO and exactly what it does. First of all, let me just say this executive order was so beautifully and thoroughly written. Perfect. It was perfect from top to bottom. The executive order was called Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation. But I think that's important because one of the things that this EO does not address, but what has been co-opted by the left, is the phrase gender affirming care. This EO does not refer to it as that. They call it plainly what it is: chemical and surgical mutilation. And so it will ensure federal agencies and institutions will not receive any financial aid if they do not adhere to this executive order. It means now taxpayers will not fund these procedures through any sort of federal employee insurance plans. It means that WPATH, which I'm sure your audience and you specifically have covered, WPATH, and really just how terrible these guidelines have been that our medical institutions and associations have followed. It says these standards will no longer be used or accepted. Another thing which I think is fantastic in terms of really trying to tackle the issue of gender dysphoria is this executive order will encourage therapy as treatment to gender dysphoria rather than jumping right to hormones and surgeries, again, especially for minors. And one other important thing that the media hasn't really covered that this executive order does specifically is it extends the statute of limitations and supports litigation against physicians who have performed these acts on minors. So again, you look at some of these detransitioners, which have been a huge voice on this topic, and really a large part in why this was a priority for President Trump. Oftentimes, they don't realize whether it's because of underlying conditions they may have, like autism, like some form of trauma, even in the form of sexual trauma, bipolar disorder. That's another common one. They don't realize sometimes until far after they have been mutilated that they regret what they've done. And so this executive order, it extends the statute of limitations for them to be able to pursue litigation against these physicians. All wonderful things. Again, the executive order was really perfectly written. So all that to say, now it's about enforcing it. That's where I think the issue lies. We've already seen where several doctors in Texas, look at Dr. Ethan Heim, the incredibly brave whistleblower who became a political prisoner at the hands of Joe Biden and his Department of Justice. For saying, hey, this is going on in Texas. We have a law that prevents this. The Department of Justice under Joe Biden went after him and his family relentlessly. He's just now issued under President Trump a free man again. But now it's about enforcing it. We make sure these hospitals listen to, of course, our government, but again, to what the people want, as made very clear on November 5th.
Mm. Yeah, I love to hear those wins. Boy, things are really changing for the better. And you have always been just such a bold voice for truth and accountability, not just in sports, but really in support of society at large. And, I loved when you recently called out Selena Gomez for her overly emotional reaction to the deportation of criminals. And then your video really struck a chord with so many Americans. What do you make of the left's double standards? I mean, this is ridiculous. We have to keep calling them out.
Absolutely, we do. Watching that video, to me, it just felt like the height of hypocrisy, Hollywood hypocrisy. Well, I think it was on par with how the campaign between Donald Trump and between Kamala Harris went. You look at Kamala Harris's campaign. She had people like Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B on stage with her. That doesn't represent the American people. And that was what Selena Gomez's video showed to me. Donald Trump and his entire campaign, and of course during his presidency, he doesn't care. He doesn't care what someone like Selena Gomez is going through because, again, that doesn't represent the realities that so many Americans face. So we must keep calling them out and notice what we do when it does, or when we do this. Selena Gomez immediately, within the hour, deleted her video. She posted another clip pretty soon after and said, apparently it's not okay to show empathy for anyone. She then went on to delete that clip. So it shows you, number one, they don't really actually have any convictions if they're willing to, with a little pushback, delete their previous statements that they've put out. But again, that's the power of the American people. I think for a long time, we were censored at the hands of people like Mark Zuckerberg, which, might I add very briefly, I don't know why we have a lot of people who are, on the conservative side, whether it's elected or unelected bureaucrats who are suddenly jumping to his side and beginning to trust Mark Zuckerberg. I will not forget what he did and how he treated people like me in 2021, for that matter, 2022. But besides the point, we've been censored for a long time. But now, because of people like Elon Musk buying X, because the mainstream media is really dying, we're able to now get the full narrative, really see what's happening. Therefore, we're given a seat at the table, and we must do our due diligence and what I believe is our civic duty in calling these people out, again, whether they are elected, our elected leaders, definitely, but even those with platforms who are not elected, like Selena Gomez.
Yeah. And you're right. It's so important that in order to see these changes really permanent, we need Congress to act. We need Congress to get behind, Donald Trump and the people's mandate. And we saw how things really turned so upside down. I mean, it was like somebody flipped a switch suddenly when Joe Biden came into office, and suddenly, they were calling evil good and good evil, and we're seeing a reversal. We're finally seeing that. But for long-lasting change, we the people have got to make sure that we elect the right people in office, and that they represent the views that the majority of Americans embrace. And it is not this sort of transgender craziness, men competing in women's sports, children being taught that they're born in the wrong body, women not being able to compete fairly. All of that is just basic common sense, and you really started a movement. We're so proud of everything that you've done. You've also mentioned that under Trump's DOJ, justice is being served. Can you share any other wins or things that you might see reversed under Trump's Department of Justice?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, I very briefly mentioned it, but it really is a huge win. Dr. Ethan Heim, again, this is someone who, in the state of Texas, is a surgeon. Last year, I believe it was about 7-ish months ago, I think it was in June of 2024, he blew the whistle on Texas Children's Hospital. And he said, hey, we have a law passed here. It went through the legislature. It was signed by the governor. Our attorney general is supposed to be enforcing it. Why are there doctors performing these surgeries on minors? He was the only one who was willing to say this. But of course, that was not satisfactory for the Biden administration. They went after him. And the grounds of which they went after him was violating HIPAA, which again is total nonsense. And to really highlight what they did, I mean, they took all of his guns away. They charged him with a felony. But again, he is a free man now. So I think that's just what we're going to see more of. Of course, we saw President Trump, what he did with nonviolent J6ers, what he did with these pro-life protesters who were arrested for praying outside of abortion clinics. Just your everyday people that the Biden administration went after, and even how they went after President Trump. I hope it was a message to everyone. They didn't really want President Trump. They wanted to go after you and me. And that's been made clear in several of their prosecutions. So to see President Trump really step in for normal, everyday people, that's what we will see more of, because he is a man of the people. Even watching him in North Carolina, it was so powerful because, of course, this is an area that has been neglected by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris throughout her campaign since Hurricane Helene hit. But you see President Trump, he's there, he's giving a press conference, and he allows the people to come up and speak. That to me spoke volumes, even without hearing the words that came out of these people from North Carolina, what came out of their mouth, just the visual of him giving them the microphone. that's the kind of man that President Trump is, and that's the kind of president that we can expect him to be for the next 4 years.
Yes, all good stuff. Thank you so much. Now, tell us about your recent podcast, your great podcast, Gains for Girls podcast. Now, you tackle so many issues there facing modern women, and you're hosting conversations with so many strong voices that really are standing up for what's right. Tell us what inspired you to start the show, what impact you hope to make through these conversations, and how AMAC members can tune in.
Absolutely. Well, you can find it on outkick.com. It is called Gains for Girls. You can find all things podcasts on outkick.com, but it really is amazing. Just the caliber of people who have come on the show and been willing to talk about, again, some of the pressing issues. So, for example, this week we had Senator Mullen to go over all things Senate confirmation hearings, whether it was about Pete Hegseth. Of course, we have RFK, Tulsi, Kash Patel all coming up. Last week was Senator Katie Britt following the Laken-Riley Act. She was the sponsor of the Laken-Riley Act. Of course, it passed on President Trump's desk. He is soon to sign it. So all exciting things. So we have legislators. We have, again, everyday people who have been affected by these issues. We have world-leading scientists. I mean, it's remarkable. The array of people who have been willing to come on, share common sense, share some of the things that matter to them and how we can improve our lives as Americans, what we can do, the actions and the steps that we can take to make America great again. So it's been amazing. Again, it's just wild to me because what I have found myself doing, and truly the passion that I have for it, is just not one that I ever expected. It's not one that I ever planned for. It's not one that I ever even wanted, really. Even still, quite frankly, it's wild to me that we have to talk about these things. But nonetheless, it's necessary, and I would argue that it's urgent that we do, which is why voices like yours are so important. Educating people, especially now, right? Like I said, it's easy to think we've won, but you continuing to put the news out there, telling people this is what's going on, this is how we stay involved, this is how we do our due diligence as taxpayers, as Americans. It's needed. So very grateful for you. And yes, again, outkick.com, and it is called Gains for Girls.
Well, Riley, we so appreciate you being with us. We love your passion, your courage, your commitment, really standing up for fairness and truth. It's so inspiring. And, I just want to encourage everybody out there. We are in a fight, and this fight is not yet over. We need to stand up and defend women's sports. We need to defend biological reality and ensure that there's a level playing field. It's so important. So if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, leave a review. We want to keep these critical conversations going. Be sure to follow Riley Gaines. And thank you all for tuning in. And remember, standing up for truth is never the wrong choice. Until next time, stay bold, stay informed, and keep fighting the good fight. God bless you all.
The Association of Mature American Citizens is the conservative voice for Americans 50 and older. AMAC is fighting for the values that you hold dear. Join today. Together, we can write the course of America.